Humanity has a terrifying obsession with fixing itself. From drinking radioactive water for a morning boost to surgically implanting goat glands for romance, our ancestors made catastrophic choices in the name of self-improvement. Forget modern self-help books. We are looking at 50 times people tried to forcefully upgrade their lives and nearly destroyed themselves instead. 1. Back in the early 20th century, America had a deeply disturbing obsession with building a better human being. It was called the eugenics movement, and it was basically the original, horrific version of genetic gatekeeping. So-called scientific experts convinced the government that society could be perfected by encouraging the wealthy to breed, while forcibly stopping anyone they deemed unfit. Seriously, this was sold to the public as a brilliant leap forward in human evolution. In reality, it was just a state-sponsored horror show disguised as self-improvement. It proves that sometimes the absolute dumbest, most dangerous ideas come from people with the fanciest college degrees. 2. If you ever feel like modern wellness trends are getting entirely out of hand, just remember that sun gazing is an actual thing people do to improve their spiritual health. The instructions are incredibly simple. You just walk outside at sunrise or sunset and stare directly into the blinding center of our solar system. What? Yes. These self-proclaimed gurus promise your brain will literally download ancient cosmic wisdom straight through your eyeballs. It sounds like a fantastic way to unlock the secrets of the universe. However, the only thing you are actually downloading is irreversible retinal damage and a permanent prescription for a white cane. 3. Corporate America has a truly masochistic obsession with improving its workforce through mandatory team-building exercises. In a desperate bid to manufacture synergy, managers will drag perfectly happy, isolated office workers into the woods to perform agonizingly awkward icebreakers and potentially lethal trust falls. The overarching theory here is that catching Bob from accounting before he shatters his spine on a pine cone will make you a highly optimized collaborative machine. In actual practice, it just unites the entire department in a shared, blinding hatred for human resources. Everyone just frantically wishes they were back in their sterile cubicles, ignoring each other's emails. 4. The absolute peak of terrifying self-improvement has to be the infamous Victorian tapeworm diet. This beauty hack makes modern detox teas look like an absolute joke. The sales pitch was undeniably tempting for anyone obsessed with extreme weight loss. You simply swallowed a pill containing a live tapeworm egg. This wriggling little passenger would then set up camp in your intestines and eat half your dinner for you. You could gorge on cake and still drop pounds. The tiny little catch? You were voluntarily hosting a massive parasite that could casually trigger meningitis, violent seizures, and a highly traumatizing bathroom exit strategy. 5. Imagine trying to improve your dinner etiquette and being accused of committing a mortal sin. When the fork was first introduced to Italy as a tool for refined eating, religious authorities absolutely lost their minds. A man using a fork to elevate his dining experience was immediately branded as unmanly and suspiciously decadent. The church genuinely condemned the utensil, arguing that God gave you perfectly good fingers to shovel meat into your face. Trying to be a civilized human with a piece of metal meant you were basically insulting the Almighty. Good luck explaining that logic the next time you eat a salad. 6. Building a polite and orderly society used to involve some incredibly aggressive hardware. Centuries ago, communities decided that the best way to improve a woman who was deemed too argumentative was to strap an iron contraption called a scold's bridle to her head. This medieval nightmare was a heavy metal mask featuring a sharp spike that brutally depressed the tongue, making it physically impossible to speak without bleeding. It was a completely deranged approach to social improvement. It operated on the flawlessly insane logic that a better society simply meant one where nobody was allowed to complain about how terrible everything was. 7. Some people find traditional sports far too mundane and decide to improve their character by combining adrenaline rushes with household chores. Enter the deeply confusing world of extreme ironing. This is a very real, very stupid activity where grown adults drag a full-sized ironing board and a hot iron to the top of a frozen mountain, or the bottom of a shark-infested ocean, just to press a dress shirt. Are you kidding me? It is a misguided quest to become a more adventurous human being by taking an already annoying Sunday afternoon task and making it unnecessarily life-threatening. 8. The dawn of the 21st century brought us the Segway, a machine that promised to completely revolutionize human transport and elevate us beyond the primitive act of walking. Investors genuinely believed this awkward two-wheeled balancing stick would fundamentally improve how society functioned. And it absolutely did. Well, only if you were a wildly unathletic mall security guard or a heavily sunburned tourist who had completely given up on physical exertion. Far from transforming humanity into an advanced futuristic species, riding one instantly transformed you into a rolling international symbol for making terrible, highly visible life choices. 9. During the mid-20th century, the ultimate symbol of a highly optimized, successful American businessman was the motorized tie rack. Men eager to improve their morning routine would install this loud, clunky mechanical marvel inside their closets. With the dramatic push of a plastic button, your mediocre collection of striped neckties would slowly rotate on a conveyor belt, allowing you to choose your daily corporate noose with peak mechanical efficiency. It was a brilliant, space-age solution to a catastrophic problem that absolutely no human being in the entire history of getting dressed has ever actually experienced. 10. Not too long ago, a massive wave of tech bros decided to improve their cultural standing by becoming elite, forward-thinking art collectors. To achieve this sophisticated new persona, they spent millions of actual dollars on non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. They genuinely believed they were buying exclusive ownership of revolutionary digital masterpieces. In reality, what they were actually purchasing was just a very expensive string of computer code pointing to a badly drawn picture of a yawning ape. It was an incredible financial flex, right up until they realized anyone on Earth could right-click and save their million-dollar investment for absolutely free. 11. Long before modern wellness influencers existed, a fake doctor named John Brinkley discovered the ultimate way to get rich off men, desperately trying to improve their fading youth. Back in the 1920s, he promised to restore male virility by surgically implanting slices of goat testicles into his human patients. Yes, you heard that correctly. It was the original, highly unsanitary biohack for the desperate and wealthy 1%. Unsurprisingly, the deeply terrifying procedure was a complete medical fraud that fixed absolutely nothing. However, it successfully transplanted a massive mountain of cash straight from the wallets of insecure old men directly into his bank account. 12. A shocking number of people attempt to improve their miserable daily lives by rearranging their furniture based on invisible, magical energy highways called ley lines. The theory suggests that the entire planet is crisscrossed by a grid of ancient cosmic power. If you perfectly align your bed or your office desk with these mystical paths, you will allegedly unlock supreme personal success and vibrant health. It is a fantastic way to feel like you are tapping into the profound secrets of the universe. That is, provided you completely ignore the fact that science has repeatedly proven these energy beams exist nowhere except inside your own imagination. 13. In the endless pursuit of physical perfection, women of the late 19th century decided that looking like a literal corpse was the peak of high fashion. To achieve a flawlessly pale, translucent complexion, they routinely snacked on arsenic wafers. These poisonous little chalk pills absolutely delivered on their promise to alter your skin tone. The minor trade-off was that they also caused violent vomiting, rapid hair loss, and a slow, agonizing death by heavy metal poisoning. It was a fiercely dedicated beauty regimen that guaranteed you would eventually achieve that highly desirable dead look, one way or the exact other. 14. Pushing the limits of human capability is usually an inspiring endeavor. That is, unless you are a French entertainer named Michel Lotito, who decided to improve his body by turning it into an industrial garbage disposal. In a deeply confusing quest for greatness, he spent his life eating completely inorganic, highly dangerous objects. We are talking about consuming multiple bicycles, shopping carts, and slowly eating an entire Cessna airplane over the course of 2 years. He proudly defended this behavior as a form of elite performance art, while the rest of the medical community just viewed it as a giant, walking psychiatric red flag with heavy metal indigestion. 15. American state fairs are usually famous for deep-fried butter and terrifying carnival rides. But a century ago, they hosted something much more sinister called fitter family contests. In a deranged attempt to build a scientifically superior society, families would voluntarily parade themselves on stage to be judged on their physical, mental, and moral genetics. They were literally poked, prodded, and evaluated exactly like prize-winning hogs or oversized watermelons. It was a smiling, aggressively wholesome attempt to engineer a master race. This just proves that America's darkest social experiments often took place right next to the cotton candy stand. 16. Why waste your hard-earned cash on expensive green juices when your own body produces a warm, salty beverage for absolutely free? Welcome to the nauseating world of urine therapy, a bizarre practice where people drink their own pee to supposedly achieve optimal health and glowing skin. Delusional enthusiasts will look you dead in the eye and claim it is a sterile, magical elixir sent to cure all ailments. Meanwhile, actual doctors tirelessly try to explain that your kidneys are functioning as a waste disposal system for a very specific reason. Aggressively chugging your own filtered garbage is definitely not a medical breakthrough. 17. Improving your family's financial standing usually involves investing or working overtime. But a twisted millionaire from the 1920s turned it into a bizarre biological blood sport. Upon his death, a wealthy lawyer created the Great Stork Derby, promising his massive fortune to the local woman who could pump out the highest number of babies in a 10-year period. It was a manic, decade-long race that transformed quiet residential neighborhoods into highly competitive human production lines. The massive cash prize was ultimately split among 4 exhausted women, who each somehow managed to produce 9 children just to secure the ultimate inheritance. 18. College students have always engaged in questionable activities to improve their social standing. But the 1930s brought a level of stupidity that defies all logic. A massive, nationwide fad swept through universities where desperate young men would publicly swallow live, wriggling goldfish. Nobody quite understood what this was actually supposed to accomplish. It was vaguely framed as a display of raw masculinity and fearless character building. In reality, it was just a completely unhinged cry for attention that achieved absolutely nothing, other than giving an entire generation of decorative pondfish some severe, deeply justified psychological trauma. 19. If you think modern energy drinks are filled with toxic chemicals, you really need to look at the ultimate health craze of the early 20th century. Wealthy industrialists desperately trying to achieve peak human performance started chugging expensive bottles of radium-infused water. A famous tycoon named Eben Byers drank several bottles of this glowing radioactive juice every single day, convinced it was the secret to endless vitality. Instead of becoming a superhuman, his bones quite literally disintegrated from the inside out, and his entire lower jaw had to be surgically removed. Talk about a wellness routine totally blowing up in your face. 20. We have all heard the cliche that laughter is the best medicine, but some desperate souls take this so literally that it becomes incredibly disturbing. Enter the highly uncomfortable world of laughter yoga. In a frantic attempt to forcefully improve their mental health and unlock deep inner joy, groups of fully grown adults will gather in public parks to violently expel fake, aggressive belly laughs at each other. Proponents swear it lowers stress and builds a better mindset. But honestly, to anyone walking by, it just looks and sounds like a mandatory rehearsal for a coordinated, mass psychiatric breakdown. 21. Whenever you feel completely overwhelmed by stress or severely spiritually blocked, just be thankful you do not live in an era where the primary medical solution was a power drill to the head. For centuries, people sought to dramatically improve their consciousness through a barbaric practice called trepanation. The theory was beautifully simple. A local healer would carve a massive hole directly into your skull to let the bad energy out and allow fresh, enlightened thoughts to magically seep in. Unsurprisingly, the only thing that actually seeped into your freshly ventilated brain was a massive, rapidly fatal bacterial infection. 22. In the relentless, obsessive pursuit of total bodily optimization, extreme biohackers have decided to take their digestive health directly into their own hands. Quite literally. In a move that defies all boundaries of human dignity, some people are performing do-it-yourself fecal transplants at home. Armed with a kitchen blender, a standard enema kit, and a smelly donation from a supposedly healthier friend, they attempt to reboot their microbiome for elite wellness. They are aggressively chasing immortality, but in reality, they are just one slightly bad batch of puree away from accidentally discovering a brand new, highly embarrassing intestinal disease. 23. When meditation and therapy completely fail to provide a mental breakthrough, a select group of absolute lunatics decide to bypass science and consult the atmosphere. In a frantic, desperate search for a complete spiritual reboot, these individuals actively try to get struck by lightning. Are you serious? They will deliberately stand in wide-open fields during violent thunderstorms, clutching giant metal poles, praying that a massive bolt of atmospheric electricity will forcefully rewire their sluggish brains. Instead of achieving instant cosmic enlightenment, they generally just end up with third-degree burns and a spectacular story for the local paramedics. 24. A bizarre movement known as radical honesty claims you can achieve the ultimate state of human enlightenment by simply refusing to ever tell a lie. No matter how incredibly brutal or completely unnecessary the truth might be, you just spit it out. Followers of this deeply flawed philosophy believe that vocalizing every single critical thought that pops into their head will lead to a highly authentic existence. While they might feel spiritually cleansed by telling their boss he looks like a sweaty goblin, the most common result of this lifestyle is a severely depleted friend group and endless, intensely hostile Thanksgiving dinners. 25. For generations, the quickest path to self-improvement and robust health was conveniently sold in a glass bottle by a shady traveling salesman. These legendary patent medicines were heavily marketed as miracle elixirs, guaranteed to cure everything from severe stomach cancer to a mildly bad attitude. The hilarious part is that the secret restorative ingredient was rarely a mystical forest herb. It was almost always just a staggering, highly illegal amount of raw opium, liquid cocaine, and heavy grain alcohol. The medicine never actually cured a single disease, it just got the patients so unbelievably high that they completely forgot they were dying. 26. If you ever want to secure a permanent, majestic legacy in the cosmos, several very clever online companies are more than happy to take your money. For a surprisingly hefty fee, they promise to officially name a distant burning ball of gas after you or a loved one. It is heavily advertised as the ultimate flex to improve your earthly significance. The tiny, hilarious catch is that absolutely zero scientific organizations on Earth actually recognize these commercial registries. You are not buying a piece of galactic real estate. You are just purchasing a spectacularly expensive piece of cardboard with a shiny sticker on it. 27. Human beings have a weird habit of taking incredibly pointless habits and turning them into grueling sports. Which brings us to the majestic world of competitive vaping. In this bizarre subculture, becoming an elite, superior human means mastering the delicate art of blowing obnoxiously massive, perfectly shaped clouds of chemical vapor. It is essentially competitive breathing, but heavily upgraded with neon flashing lights and the overpowering, aggressive stench of synthetic blue raspberry. The ultimate goal is blowing a flawless smoke ring, while the highly unfortunate side effect is permanently transforming your own lungs into the texture of a damp, moldy kitchen sponge. 28. Long before the invention of modern medical resuscitation, highly educated doctors from the 18th century possessed a cutting-edge, absolutely insane technique to revive drowning victims. They utilized the profoundly baffling medical marvel known as the tobacco smoke enema. The professional logic dictated that forcefully blowing thick, hot cigar smoke directly up a dying patient's rectum would aggressively warm their core and instantly shock their lungs back into action. Shockingly, pumping greenhouse gases into a person's plumbing did not save lives. It turns out that the cure for severe oxygen deprivation is definitely not a fiery blast of tar to the colon. 29. In a truly bold, wildly unhinged attempt to improve the terrible state of the world, a sitting Nebraska state senator decided the best course of action was to file a formal lawsuit against the creator of the universe. He marched right into a courthouse and sought a permanent legal injunction against the Almighty, officially blaming him for causing widespread death, catastrophic destruction, and general terror across the globe. Unsurprisingly, the highly anticipated legal battle of the century was promptly dismissed by the judge, primarily because the defendant mysteriously failed to provide a valid mailing address or appear for his scheduled court date. 30. During the chaotic cultural shifts of the 1970s, thousands of people decided that the best way to improve their stagnant lives and achieve ultimate personal freedom was to take off all their clothes and sprint wildly through crowded stadiums. This bizarre phenomenon, known as streaking, was heavily defended as a daring philosophical act of rebellion against a deeply stuffy, oppressive society. It provided a wildly exhilarating 10-second rush of total liberation. That rush was almost always immediately followed by the deeply sobering, significantly less liberating experience of being violently tackled by stadium security and handed a massive fine for public indecency. 31. Back in 1910, the United States faced a severe national meat shortage, and the government's proposed solution was so dangerously stupid it almost sounds like a cartoon. Politicians aggressively pushed the American Hippo Bill, a genius plan to import herds of massive, highly aggressive hippopotamuses from Africa and unleash them into the swamps of Louisiana to be farmed like cattle. They genuinely wanted to solve a minor agricultural crisis by flooding the bayous with one of the deadliest animals on the planet. Thankfully, the bill narrowly failed, saving Southerners from a terrifying reality where angry 3-ton swamp cows regularly destroyed their base boats. 32. Back in the early 20th century, an obsessive health guru named Horace Fletcher convinced millions of Americans that the ultimate secret to human perfection was just chewing. He aggressively promoted Fletcherism, a grueling daily practice where you had to chew every single bite of food at least 100 times until it turned into a miserable, flavorless liquid. He promised this would create superhuman digestion and elite moral character. In reality, it just turned family dinners into agonizingly silent, 2-hour endurance events where everyone stared at the blank wall, furiously mashing their potatoes into absolute nothingness. 33. The burning desire to achieve the absolute peak of high fashion has driven people to commit some spectacular acts of self-sabotage, but nothing beats the sheer idiocy of the hobble skirt. Back in the early 1910s, women trying to significantly improve their elegance squeezed themselves into these tightly bound garments. The skirts were designed to be so incredibly narrow at the ankles that taking a normal stride was physically impossible. It was a completely voluntary, highly fashionable choice to severely handicap yourself. They sacrificed the basic biological ability to walk across a room just to look slightly more like a stylish, distressed penguin. 34. Even legendary American presidents occasionally get completely delusional about how to improve the nation. Theodore Roosevelt became so obsessed with making American society function faster that he created the simplified spelling board. He aggressively demanded that the entire country permanently change the spelling of perfectly good words, ordering that through be written as through and night become night. It was a bureaucratic attempt to literally hack the English language for speed. The stubborn American public took one collective look at this mandatory government grammar lesson and immediately told the rough-riding president to take a hike. 35. Throughout history, eccentric groups have tried to build a flawless utopian society, but the 19th century Oneida community took the concept of social improvement to a deeply uncomfortable level. They fully believed they could achieve pure spiritual perfection through a practice called complex marriage. This was an absolute free-for-all where every single man was officially married to every single woman in town. To avoid absolute chaos, they also implemented incredibly strict, highly stressful biological rules for the men during intimacy. It was framed as a majestic, holy experiment to build a better world, but it basically just functioned as the most relentless, exhausting roommate situation imaginable. 36. Decades ago, the medical establishment proudly introduced what they genuinely believed was the ultimate, miraculous life hack for curing severe mental illness. It was called the ice pick lobotomy, and doctors promised it would rapidly improve a troubled patient's life in just 10 quick minutes. The terrifying procedure was so highly praised by the scientific community that its creator actually won a Nobel Prize. What could possibly go wrong? Well, people soon realized that forcefully scrambling the frontal lobes of a human brain did not cure depression. It merely transformed vibrant, struggling individuals into permanently blank, highly manageable, emotionless zombies. 37. For over 2 agonizing millennia, the undisputed golden rule of medical self-improvement was incredibly brutal. Basically, if you feel terrible, just drain a massive amount of your own blood. This genius practice, known as bloodletting, was aggressively prescribed for absolutely everything. Got a mild cough? Drain a pint. Feeling a bit sad? Open a vein. Highly respected physicians firmly believed this would perfectly balance your bodily fluids and create a vibrant, healthy human being. This miraculous healing method was so incredibly backwards and physically devastating that it is historically suspected of casually murdering thousands of patients, including the very first president of the United States. 38. A truly bizarre phenomenon occurs on commercial flights, where a certain demographic of passengers desperately tries to make the world a more grateful place by violently clapping the second the airplane touches the runway. They view this spontaneous applause as a noble, deeply appreciative gesture to celebrate their survival and shower the flight crew with praise. It is a very sweet, entirely harmless attempt at social improvement that completely ignores one hilarious fact. The exhausted pilots locked inside the heavily soundproofed cockpit cannot hear a single thing, and they were generally planning on landing the multi-million-dollar aircraft safely regardless of your applause. 39. In a frantic quest to achieve absolute bodily purity, alternative wellness fans will gladly shove a hollow, flaming tube directly into their own heads. This incredibly sketchy practice is known as ear candling. The ridiculous theory suggests that the heat from the open flame creates a magical vacuum that forcefully sucks years of toxic sludge and bad energy straight out of your ear canal. It looks incredibly ancient, mystical, and profoundly dangerous. However, ruthless scientific testing has proven that the supposed suction does not exist, and the terrifying brown clump left inside the tube is quite literally just melted candle wax. 40. For centuries, the absolute brightest scientific minds on the planet were convinced they could drastically improve public health by simply avoiding ugly smells. This was the era of miasma theory, where doctors confidently declared that terrifying diseases like cholera and the plague were directly caused by inhaling stinky, foul-smelling air. To build a stronger, healthier society, wealthy citizens frantically carried expensive scented handkerchiefs and doused themselves in heavy floral perfumes to block out the garbage. They were literally trying to fight off microscopic, deadly bacteria with aggressive aromatherapy, proving that smelling fantastic is a terrible defense mechanism against a raging global pandemic. 41. The legendary Collier brothers of New York City took the admirable concept of extreme self-reliance and turned it into a deadly psychological horror show. In an intense, paranoid effort to make themselves completely independent and heavily fortified against any possible disaster, they became the ultimate urban hoarders. Over several decades, they aggressively packed their massive mansion with over 140 tons of random street garbage, newspapers, and elaborate, lethal booby traps. Their grand, insane vision of creating the perfect, self-sufficient fortress ultimately backfired spectacularly when one of the brothers was violently crushed to death by his own carefully curated pile of junk. 42. The Roaring Twenties gave birth to a massive wave of cultural stupidity, but nothing screams desperate self-improvement quite like the bizarre sport of flagpole sitting. Ordinary citizens, absolutely desperate to achieve legendary social status and prove their unmatched mental toughness, would voluntarily climb up hundreds of feet in the air to balance on a tiny wooden disc. They would perch up there for days, or sometimes even weeks, braving the elements just to be called a champion. Of course, the real athletic achievement wasn't the extreme balance or the dangerous heights. The true miracle was pretending the entire time that you didn't desperately need a bathroom. 43. One of the most tragic, universally painful attempts at personal improvement happens when older adults frantically try to upgrade their social status by aggressively adopting teenage slang. It is always a very bold, deeply desperate effort to prove they are still hip, energetic, and totally tapped into the modern cultural zeitgeist. They will drop words like sus or no cap in the middle of a casual office meeting, fully expecting to be embraced by the youth. Tragically, when delivered with a bad back and a mortgage, this linguistic camouflage acts as a blazing neon sign, aggressively announcing that you are dangerously close to retirement. 44. Imagine believing you could dramatically improve every single aspect of your physical and spiritual life just by sitting completely still inside a wooden closet. That was the hilarious, deeply unscientific promise of the orgone accumulator, a bizarre, metallic-lined box invented by a rogue psychoanalyst named Wilhelm Reich. He passionately promised his desperate followers that simply resting inside this claustrophobic contraption would aggressively pump their bodies full of mysterious, invisible cosmic life energy. The federal government was so incredibly unimpressed by this magical healing furniture that they actually threw him in federal prison, firmly establishing that sometimes a heavily overpriced wooden box is absolutely just a box. 45. As the late 1990s came to a close, millions of incredibly stressed Americans frantically tried to transform themselves into rugged, off-grid survivalists to prepare for the terrifying Y2K apocalypse. Convinced that a tiny computer glitch was going to instantly plunge modern society back into the dark ages, everyday suburbanites hoarded massive gasoline generators and terrifying mountains of canned goods. They were absolutely ready to emerge from the ashes as the ultimate self-reliant human beings. Then, the clock struck midnight. Absolutely nothing crashed. The electrical grid was perfectly fine, and millions of very embarrassed people were suddenly stuck eating canned pinto beans for the next 6 years. 46. The absolute holy grail of lazy American self-improvement peaked with the booming industry of subliminal messaging tapes. The heavily marketed promise was completely irresistible to anyone looking for a shortcut to greatness. You could supposedly rewire your brain to become obscenely wealthy, wildly confident, or instantly quit smoking, all while taking a comfortable nap. You just had to listen to an audio cassette of soothing ocean waves that secretly contained hidden, mind-altering commands. Naturally, the rigorous medical science behind this was completely non-existent. The only thing these deeply manipulative sleep tapes actually succeeded in improving was the offshore bank accounts of the shady companies selling them. 47. If you ever feel insecure about your personality, Victorian science had an incredibly invasive way to fix you. It was called phrenology. Doctors genuinely believed they could map out your entire character, intelligence, and moral flaws simply by aggressively rubbing the random bumps on your bare skull. If you had a lumpy head, you were officially diagnosed as a degenerate. It was heavily marketed as the ultimate self-improvement diagnostic tool. In practice, it was just a fantastic excuse for a wealthy, bearded man in a tailored suit to deeply massage your scalp and formally diagnose you as a complete idiot. 48. Most rational adults try to improve their future by putting a little money into a standard retirement account. But a select group of wealthy eccentrics are literally betting on a sci-fi resurrection. Welcome to the deeply weird, freezing cold world of cryonics. This is the ultimate, incredibly expensive life hack, where you pay a company to freeze your lifeless corpse in a vat of liquid nitrogen. If you are on a tight budget, they will happily just chop off your head and freeze that instead. The grand delusional hope is that future scientists will eventually thaw you out, assuming they do not just use your frozen skull as a quirky paperweight. 49. The relentless corporate grind has convinced modern, hyper-aggressive biohackers that a regular cup of black coffee simply isn't good enough for peak morning performance. To radically improve their daily brain power and crush the competition, they religiously consume a horrifying oily concoction known as bulletproof coffee. This involves aggressively blending strong coffee with massive scoops of grass-fed butter and heavy concentrated dietary oils. The marketing desperately promises you will experience limitless mental clarity and supreme energy. In harsh reality, all you are actually getting is an incredibly greasy, high-calorie breakfast and a violently urgent, highly unscheduled sprint to the nearest office bathroom. 50. Long before modern self-help books or expensive life coaches, the fastest, most reliable way to massively improve your eternal soul was completely transactional. For centuries, the highest religious authorities offered a brilliant, incredibly corrupt system known as the sale of indulgences. You did not actually have to become a better, more moral human being. You could quite literally just bribe your way into paradise. It was the original shameless pay-to-win scheme for the afterlife, allowing wealthy sinners to purchase a golden VIP ticket straight out of purgatory. The wildly profitable scam worked flawlessly for years, right up until it accidentally triggered the massive, history-altering Protestant Reformation. We mock them, but let's be painfully honest. Some of you watching this are probably drinking dirt-flavored supplement water right now. Tell me in the comments, what is the dumbest modern health trend that future generations will put on a list exactly like this? Get aggressively judgmental down there. Also, hit like and subscribe before you let an internet guru convince you to eat dirt.